FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
There's this notion that we can't throw punches. I mean, it's the exact opposite of the American Taliban, right? They think violence is a means to an end. Our side gets really, really nervous when you use any sort of rhetoric that is in any way seems or feels violent. And calling the American Taliban is clearly a harsh rhetorical turn of phrase. But it gets the point across in 2 words. I don't have to make a big argument. I don't have to write 60,000 words to get my point across. 2 words does the trick. It exposes them for what they are. And what's happened, I think, as you know, last couple of weeks, is that people are realizing that, right? You get this crazy guy in Florida who wants to burn Qurans, right? Oh, American Taliban. You get you have this candidate in Delaware, this teabagger candidate. I don't know if you guys are aware. There's a very reasonable Republican who should win the Republican primary and probably would win Joe Biden's whole Senate seat. So this would be a Republican pickup. But all the crazies, you know, Sarah Palin and Jim DeMint and the NRA, they're all going for this lunatic teabagger who hasn't paid her taxes in 10 years and thinks masturbation's a sin before God. But you see, masturbation's a sin before God. It's like, oh, yeah, there's the American Taliban. Like every day, these people confirm my thesis. And more and more people are talking about it. Today, Foreign Policy Magazine had an article came out talking about this Foreign Policy Magazine, like really serious intellectual publication, the Talibanization of America. So suddenly it's like, you know, maybe Markos wasn't so crazy and maybe he's not so out of line, because this is what this country is headed to. This is the kind of people that are trying to achieve power. They've clearly stated that they will use any means possible to achieve that power. And as we sit here looking at them, a lot of us don't want to admit that this is what we face. We don't want to admit that there is sort of this American Taliban, these fundamentalist right-wingers who want to use violence to impose a rigid, regressive ideology on the rest of us. We don't want to admit that. That's why a lot of liberals sort of like, shouldn't be using those kind of words. That's a little too much. But it is what it is. And we can't sugarcoat it. We can't pretend that this is not what we face. We can't pretend that we're facing a reasonable ideological enemy. If it was a question of tax cuts for the middle class, or tax cuts for millionaires, I wouldn't be talking about danger for a future of our society. I would disagree with tax cuts for the millionaires for other reasons, but that's not what the danger comes from. And those aren't the people that are taking over the conservative movement and the Republican Party right now. The people who are doing so are ideologically dangerous. I write about them in this book. It's funny at times, it's scary at times, but ultimately we have to be aware of them, and no matter how upset or annoyed we might be at Democrats and how demoralized we might be at what has and hasn't happened the last 2 years, we have to realize that in the balance, the other side is scary, legitimately scary. And if they have their way, they would have Islamic style fundamentalism on these shores, and they're working towards that.